Hi, and welcome to the Yes You May podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Mae Gray, where we talk all the unfiltered confidence so that you can live your best life that's the most fulfilled, hopefully with no regrets. Today, my guest is Shanwtà Hooks. She is a speaker, just like me, and Miss Shawntà, a belonging expert, which I'm excited to dive into. So, hi, Shawntà. Welcome to the show.
Hello, so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you coming down for us. If you would you just give the brief synopsis to introduce yourself to the people that can know who you are?
Yes, again, my name is Shawntà Hooks, and I am a belonging, leadership, and mindfulness speaker, expert, and experience curator. The long and short of it is, I fuse my 20-year leadership background. I worked in public accounting, risk management, and even automation transformation for a few years. So I picked up a lot as it relates to leadership, confidence, and how to really excel in the workplace. And I combine that with my expertise in mindfulness and meditation and even spirituality to create experiences, keynotes, retreat style leadership development experiences that really get to the heart of the attendee, as well as, benefit the organization by creating and empowering leaders to be more present and to understand the power in the present moment.
That's awesome. I think that's something that we are longing for more and more and are kind of coming back to. It's something I think people went away from and are either just discovering or realizing the importance of it and how it's not a weakness, but actually a benefit in the business world. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
it is no longer negative, it is now positive.
Yeah, and it's not just positive, it's a strategic imperative. Like with all the complexities of, all the complexities of life right now post COVID, as we think about people still trying to figure out how to navigate hybrid work, generational.
Mhm.
I think I learned this from you that there were, so many generations in the workplace at one time right now and
5.
navigating five, right? Literally at the same time, navigating that. And of course, navigating stress, anxiety as it relates to political, economic, social experiences, and just organizations changing rapidly and the way that that impacts the employee, as well as entrepreneurs. We need something that will remind us how to not just be centered, but how to calm our nervous system. And so, a
Yes,
lot of the language I use and what I teach is really, helping people learn how to calm their nervous system, regulate their nervous system in the moment, so that they can be a more effective and confident decision maker.
that's amazing. I've actually noticed an uptick in people and maybe it's they're finally feeling comfortable to say, but I've had people sharing with me lately, like, they're lacking motivation, they're lacking drive, they're feeling burnt out, and I think post-COVID now, like you mentioned, we were all in this, like, survival mode, and
Mhm.
even though it's been a couple years and we both live here in Georgia, so we didn't have it as long of a social distance, situation as a lot of the states did, thankfully, to be honest, because I think it was
Yeah.
beneficial for us, but I think we're just kind of getting out of that fight or flight mode. A
Yes.
lot of people are, and we don't know what's going on. We don't understand, like, why am I feeling this way? Why do I not have the same drive I used to? Why am I just exhausted? And I think your work really highlights a skill to help combat that. Have you noticed that at all?
Absolutely.
Had people talk to you about that at all?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
And that's funny you say that because that's what I say in one of my my most requested keynotes, which is trigger proof leadership, which is really
Okay.
about how to navigate, the experience of feeling triggered during change, during disruption, as a leader, or as someone on a team that is supporting, other leaders. This idea that we feel in our, like, you can feel it even if you can't put language to it, but this unsettled, this really
Yes.
busy, this hyper distracted. There are a lot of things socially that have happened post COVID, if we just talk about,
True.
post COVID, that are contributing towards that, right? I mean, just think practically. When we were in the middle of COVID, we were using social media a lot more, right? We were, now that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It is what it is. And so we were using social media. We were on Zoom calls, talking to our family and our friends. And we were, using digital tools of connection. much more frequently than we are now or than we were prior to. And so that becomes a habit, right? Like
Mhm.
that
Yep.
becomes a habit that becomes ingrained in the way you show up. And I'm speaking for myself. Like I still sometimes wake up and, scroll on my phone, even though I try to have techniques to prevent me from doing that, right?
Yeah,
But we're
right.
all victims to this system.
It's
And
easier said than done.
so easier said than done. But yes, having skills and tools. And the keynote, I talk about how resilience is a skill that can be
Mm,
developed through mindfulness, through meditation, through noticing your thoughts. If you take out the language of mindfulness and meditation, what I'm really talking about is noticing what you're thinking, noticing how you're feeling in your body, being aware of that tension, and being aware of when you're happy. Right? We
right.
talk so much about presence from the perspective of noticing our negative thoughts, but it's also noticing what situations happen that bring you joy, that bring you good feelings, that bring you good thoughts. What are you doing then? If you focus on that, now you can start to create, an idea for new habits,
Mhm.
and start to slowly but surely bring those new habits in your life. And those new habits are the things that will help calm your nerve. Well, that could help calm your nervous system, depending on what those habits are.
Minor detail, depending
Right,
on what those habits are. No,
right.
that's important. I've talked about that too, like, life is meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to
Yes.
be felt and experienced. We're supposed to have feelings, all of the feelings, and understanding but at the same time, understanding what brings you joy, what makes you happy, and then in those moments when you're frustrated or angry, you're just down and don't know why, and you already know what those are, then you can try to, recreate, bring that back in, be mindful about choosing something different. And that's something I talk about too is like we get to choose. I think
Mhm.
that's something we forget. We forget that as humans, and to my knowledge, we're the only ones that have the power of choice. We get to choose to do something different or change or learn or grow, but it takes that choice to do so. We don't have to be stuck forever,
Right.
but you're gonna have your ups and you're gonna have your downs. Like that's inevitable and it's okay.
Yeah.
Um, tell us a little bit about your journey. Let's go back in time. I know it, but not everybody else knows it. When did you get into this? How did you start off? And then let's start with that. How did you get into this whole life? Have you always been this woosah person, or is this something that you've discovered as an adult?
It's a common both, yes and no. There is an aspect of my personality that has always been very calm,
Mm.
very wise. I'm the oldest sibling of all of my I have 3 sisters and a brother, and I'm the
Oh wow,
oldest. And so I've always had, this sort of wise woman energy, even as a small child.
that's great.
But meditation, no, funny enough, meditation was first introduced to me through my father.
Mm.
My father, Rodney Hooks, who is now deceased, picked up meditation as a lifestyle habit in his young days of being a professional kickboxer. And so
Huh.
my father studied and competed at a very high level in Muay Thai, Taekwondo, and other disciplines of martial arts. And through that study and that mastery, he picked up meditation as a lifestyle habit. Now, to put it in perspective, however, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan in the
Yeah.
80s and 90s. We were not, talking about meditation,
No,
right?
no,
Not
almost.
especially not in Detroit, maybe in, Oregon or,
Yeah,
San Francisco,
out west.
but not in the blue collar city of
No.
Detroit, which is interesting because Detroit is also a very creative city,
Yeah.
and so there are surely were pockets of like that hippie culture, which is really
Mhm.
what it was back then. And now I'm coming into this realization that my dad was really a part of that hippie culture. He just didn't have that. He didn't wear those clothes. He was very cool. He was very modern. He was an architect by trade. He was very stylish. Aesthetics and style were actually very important to him. But that combination of bringing mindfulness into his lifestyle early on really suited him because he experienced a lot of trauma in his life.
Mhm.
And meditation was definitely the tool that helped him develop and build resilience to be able to navigate and still show up for his family, show up for his children in ways that many, many people would have absolutely given up. So the way the story goes, however, is that I experienced witnessing my father, have these habits. It was never something that I picked up as a habit. because I think, just the way I'm wired, I'm an accountant by trade. I, think in a very logical, I need to understand the
Got the
answer,
guidelines.
especially back then, right? One plus one equals two, and that's it. And no one taught me, no one taught me
Sure.
the science behind meditation or the
Well,
real why.
I don't know if they knew it back then either,
And they didn't know it,
to
right?
be fair.
Right, and to be
Yeah.
fair, my father was sick for a lot of my life, so
Oh,
even he was unable to use words to explain why
wow.
this should be a lifestyle habit. So I didn't actually pick up meditation until, like, 2018 is when
Okay.
I first started to really, think of meditation, specifically meditation as a lifestyle habit, and once I picked it up, after, like, 2 years of picking it up and putting it down and
Oh, yeah,
picking it
for
up
sure.
and putting it down, once it's stuck, it's stuck. And the
Mhm.
reason that it stuck was because now, thanks to YouTube and thanks to technology, beyond AI, but just technology in general, I'm given all of this amazingly rich information that serves my needs, the way I need to learn, the way I need to understand. And within, by the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, right before COVID, I was actually meditating every day using very neuroscience backed techniques such as listening to binaural sounds, which are sounds and frequencies that are designed to, stimulate certain aspects of the brain, your theta waves, delta waves, so on and so forth. And, exploring,
Mhm.
meditation and mindfulness, particularly how it could serve me in the workplace. And
Okay.
I saw a really unique connection that I saw a need and I saw no one meeting the need. I saw at the time I was working as a vice president of transformation at a bank, at a Fortune 100 bank, and there was this desire to increase the amount of innovation and creativity and openness to change for the employees, which was language that I was hearing in terms of exactly what meditation can stimulate and the science behind why. And so I actually, speaking of confidence, I was so confident at that time because literally because of meditation, it was reducing the amygdala, which is the part of my brain that would say, no, don't reach out to the chief HR officer on a random Tuesday and let him know that you have ideas on how you can actually achieve his 2020 strategic vision of inspiring greater innovation in his workforce. And I absolutely did that. I sent him an email. He responded. COVID hit. So we actually didn't get a chance to meet until several months later. But by the time we met, not only did I have this sort of strategic vision, I had already developed a process. I started to give talks at
Awesome.
work on the side, just sharing my story, sharing my father's story, that grew into a community that started very grassroots, just a couple people joining me every third Friday of the month to curate conversations and learn how we can use meditation to enhance our workplace experience. And, over time, I had like 500 members and I built programs and
It's impressive.
keynotes, and I delivered a keynote at the company at one of their largest conferences. It was like 600 people in the audience in person a few years later. And, I was just so, so fearless, like just the idea of not doing this because of fear. And I absolutely felt the fear, but it,
Mhm.
it, it just very rarely did it stop me from doing anything because I had so much clarity of thought, because I was meditating so much. And after a little while of doing it internally at the organization, at the company, I started to see this as a business opportunity, and not and more than a business opportunity, but a real value add to
Yeah.
organizations because nobody was talking about it the way I was. I mean, there are tons of people that speak and teach meditation, and I follow a lot of them. It's a large chunk of my social media and
Yep.
the people that I follow on thought leadership, but very few people that have, well, maybe no one, right, that has my background that can bring this nuanced perspective of Detroit, which is a mixture of grit and creativity, bring this nuanced perspective of business and executive leadership, and what is how this can be applied from a strategic perspective.
Mhm.
Plus, this really deep spiritual understanding of how this, depending on the language you want to use, the language I like to use is sacred leadership. Like, how
Mm.
can we tie our leadership, our values, our authenticity to truly who we are? Like, really, when you really sit down and think, who am I? What
Yeah.
was I put on this earth to do? And how does that tie into the role that I'm serving right now? Whether I am a frontline employee, an entrepreneur, or a CEO of a company, or a vice president, middle manager, it doesn't matter. Everything that we do should in some way be tied to what we love to do and what we were put on this earth to do. And you may not be at the final destination now, but all of those steps feed into that bigger picture. And so helping people and organizations be able to break that down, I'm like, there's clearly a value to that. Of course, people would pay for this. And they did. I had my first paid, external experience in like 2021, and
Nice.
and went on this journey of doing wearing both hats as an employee and an entrepreneur. And as life would have it, I was sort of not like kind of ripped out of my corporate job, um,
Oh,
and placed into this space of this is what I'm going to do full time.
mhm.
And I was so supported in that decision. So I've been a full time entrepreneur for a little over a year now, and I have absolutely no regrets whatsoever.
No regrets. Hey, that's awesome. You mentioned how you think or find that meditation has actually increased your confidence because it quieted your thoughts. That's something that you don't normally hear tied together, right?
Okay.
You think
Yeah.
in my mind anyways,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think of meditation as a way to increase my confidence. I think of it as a way to, like, calm, to ground myself, to get my thoughts together, but I've never thought of it through the lens of confidence. So tell me more.
Yeah, thank you for
Well,
asking that because I often take for granted, right,
okay.
that it's not a direct correlation for probably most people.
It's
But
not known anyways, but
yeah,
it
no,
might you
absolutely.
might
I
be onto
I
something.
appreciate that. Yeah. So when you think about, let's talk about it from a science perspective. When you think about this notion of confidence, being able to do things in places where you have fear, right, where you just have
Mhm.
a natural fear, or maybe a better word is a natural resistance, right? That's applying for the new job. That's going to the networking event where you know absolutely no one at this event,
Right.
and you can easily your thoughts can easily start to talk you out of that, and that's natural. That is the brain, the body, the nervous system, all systems working together, your hormones, right?
Mhm.
Your everything is working together to keep you safe. And without going into every single aspect of that, very simply, in the brain you have the amygdala, which is the
Yep.
part of the brain that controls fear. And so when we experience those moments of newness, which is where our confidence is actually needed the most, or I mean, one could argue, right, when we're experiencing something new, we need our confidence to kind of step up to kind of push us into
Yes.
this environment, provided that it's safe, logically safe. The amygdala doesn't care about logic. It only
Mhm.
cares about sort of the programming, right? That
Okay.
you have over time, generationally, you have developed in yourself. And so when you enter these new spaces, your amygdala is going to activate. It's
Mm,
going to do the thing that it's designed to do, to send stress hormones, to help the body do the thing that we do to keep safe, which is like cortisol, and as well as our nervous system. We have the sympathetic part of the nervous system, which is also in response to our stress and flight. And so when those systems are firing off, there is a very high probability that we'll do what we always do, which is avoidance, right? We'll do
mhm.
the thing that is natural to keep us safe, right? Which is the space where one could argue that we lack confidence. And it's all
Okay.
about our habits, right? And I'm sure you know this, but there are a lot of studies that show that certain groups of people have measurably higher confidence than others, one being white men. And it's not that they have any different science than us, they just have experiences where their wiring and
Yeah.
what actually creates an uncomfortable or a I don't want to do this experience, their wiring will respond to that differently because of their biology as well as their socialization. So,
Right.
the way meditation helps with this, there are tons of studies on this, but one of the most famous ones was a Harvard study of 2011, where they looked at 16, I think it was 16 participants in a mindfulness program. And they looked at these participants over a period of 8 weeks. And they measured their brain activity, they measured their hormones, their central nervous system, and they found that after 8 weeks of consistent meditation, the amygdala, the part of the brain that controls that stress response, as well as our parasympathetic nervous system, it actually softens.
Really?
It softens, and your nervous system, it's not so much that your nervous system softens, you're able to, with meditation and with consistent use, you're able to more efficiently navigate out of those states of fight and flight and freeze and into states of critical decision making, which is our prefrontal cortex. So the amygdala thickens, the part that will stop us and keep us from being confident. When you meditate, it gets smaller. And the part of the brain that controls our ability to actually be confident, to show up, to, say, I'm going to do this, the prefrontal cortex, it gets bigger. And so, yeah, so that is a little bit of the science behind meditation can create a neurological environment of confidence where the parts of your brain, your nervous system, and your hormones are responding in a way that physically leads to more confident outcomes.
Wow. Yeah. So there you go. I've heard, that your body doesn't know the difference between excitement and nervous, which as a speaker is something, that's really important to know, but it's also important to know just in general in those situations that are new or you're feeling a lack of confidence or you're nervous, you tell yourself, "I'm just excited."
Mhm.
That can,
Absolutely.
pending you don't talk yourself out of it, because you do that too, that can help calm you down and get you prepared to continue forward. But it's really interesting that you're literally changing your brain structure
Yeah, it's called
through meditation.
neuroplasticity.
It's
So
very
yeah, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change. And that's been one of the biggest over the last like 20 to 40 years
yeah,
in the research of mindfulness, meditation, even spirituality, the mind heart connection,
mhm,
why scientifically prayer works, why doing things in community work, like all of this stuff has now been studied and is continuing to be
yes,
studied in really, really cool ways just to help us explain the human experience. And so when you understand it from that perspective, for me, it's so empowering. It's so empowering to know that just because I'm an introvert, right? Because that's what people will attach their
their
outcomes,
title.
that identity, right? To
Yep,
these labels, to
yep,
their
label.
mental health condition, to their social condition, not condition, but their what they claim is their personality. I'm an introvert. So
Yep,
therefore X. And you can still be an introvert, but understand that your outcomes are not dependent upon your label as an introvert or your label as a person with ADHD or any
right.
other, and I'm not a doctor. I am not a psychologist. I don't have training. I don't, pretend to be an expert in that space. Where I am an expert in is the space of understanding how mindfulness can actually help us as we show up in these conditions. Whatever label you choose to apply or change, you can absolutely change your outcomes based on doing practices that root you in stillness over a period of time and in a consistent way, and understanding other ways that you're doing it too. So it's not just sitting down and breathing, it's being in nature. It's,
Mhm. Yeah,
it's
I love
being
that.
like right now, being present with this conversation, not multitasking, putting my full focus and attention on this. That's actually training the brain to be more present as well. And I believe you will actually start to, over time, get those same meditative neurological benefits as if you were to sit down in an 8 week, 20 minutes per day. If you're doing all these different things throughout the day in a mindful way, your brain is still giving you credit for that.
I like that, giving you credit for it. I totally agree, and what I think you're great at is translating this to the business world that typically has always been like, "Oh, that's nothing, it's woo-woo, it's this, it's that." Well, no, and like you said, there are some great people. I'm sure you've studied some of the Dr. Joe Dispenza stuff, like,
Oh,
his
yeah.
his studies are insane. Like, the
Yes.
stuff that he's come up with, I'm like, "Dang, dude, I wanna go to one of his things so bad." But I really love, getting out in nature. In my last podcast episode by myself, I'm like, "You gotta get outside." Like,
Mhm,
just going for a walk, put your phone away, you can take it with you if you need
mhm.
to. Try to put it away as much as you can. But just getting outside, moving your body, walking through the woods, on a trail, just even in the neighborhood, like, that can be and is a meditative state, and I always find that I get, like, my best ideas when I'm walking outside. If
Yep.
I'm stuck or bored or whatever, or I can't, you know, I feel like sometimes I limit myself or tell myself, "Oh, that's not being productive.
Yes.
That's not work. You're not accomplishing anything," when it's actually the opposite. Like, it is, for me anyways, required for me to get out, move my body, especially going for a walk, because that's when the ideas come through. And, you know I mean, I don't know the science behind that, but I'm sure there is some science there too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it logically, right?
Yeah,
When we experience something like 20,000 thoughts a day. I can't remember the exact number, but it's an
I think it's,
insane amount
yeah.
of thoughts. And when we're on autopilot, right, which
Mm,
we are on at some point, some more than others. When we're in that autopilot state, the thoughts are just going. There's no structure, there's no organization, there's no system to the thoughts. They're just rapidly firing off, and oftentimes that is a very um, inefficient, right? That's where we are prone to, we have a higher risk of distraction and forgetting things, and getting lost in the thought, right? The thought suddenly becomes the world, and that's where the confidence takes a decline, because a lot of times those thoughts will be negative depending on your
yeah,
trauma, your conditioning, so on and so forth. But what I often tell people in my sessions is that meditation, first and foremost, mindfulness meditation, it's not about stopping the thoughts from thinking. It's
yeah.
about noticing where your thoughts are. And the reason that's important is because when you notice where your thoughts are, you have now the power to change those thoughts, to
Mhm.
think something else, to slow down the thoughts, to, like, you now are activating a sense of like stepping outside of yourself and then sort of rearranging things based on what you want them to be. That's like the visual that I
Yeah,
give myself. And so over time, what I notice is when I am in mindful states, meaning when I am physically sitting and closing my eyes in stillness, when I'm going for walks, when I am listening to music, when I am doing mindful movement, those are absolutely when I get my best ideas.
yeah.
And I don't penalize myself for that. I don't say, like, "Oh, no, I'm thinking." Even though it's a good idea, I'm thinking, and I'm not supposed to be thinking because I'm supposed to be mindful right now, and I'm bad. Shame on me. I'm not being mindful. How dare I not be mindful?
Right.
I'm the meditation person, right? No, absolutely not. What's happening is what's supposed to happen. I'm in a state of clarity. And the thought is, it's coming, it's a mixture of like heart and mind. It's not just one or the other. And usually that's what it is. It's like the the inspiration from the nature. And it could be the most
Mhm.
subtle thing, it could be the slight way that the bird, and this happens a lot. Sometimes I'll notice the hawks, especially in Georgia, how at times they'll be flapping their wings really, really fast, and then they'll just soar and they'll just ride the wave. And the majority of the time that you see them, you find that they're just soaring. They're just
Yeah.
riding the wave. And so seeing that is inspiring to me. When I'm in clarity of thought, I'm like, that's like life.
Mm.
That's how life is. Sometimes we do have to work hard and we do have to, exert a lot of energy. But then there are times where we just supposed to just ride the wave and allow the current to take us where we need to go. And so that's rich wisdom that I would never want to not capture. Like that could help so many. That perspective could help so many people. And
Yeah.
so in those moments, I write it down. I'm getting better at containing those thoughts, and being able to make use of them. But I write it down, and even sometimes when I'm in stillness practice in meditation, if I get a thought that's so good, I will stop. I will get my notebook. I will write it down, and then I'll go back into meditation. Right. And so, thinking of it, a lot of what I do also is really helping people change their perspective on these
Mm.
practices.
Yeah.
Because when you shift your perspective, you start to actually do it more, and you start to be open to it becoming not just a practice, but a way of life.
Yeah. Well, it's important to be able to see the benefits and being open to that, but that's life in general too, right? Like if you're not willing to see other perspective or to look deeper into a situation, then you're going to be stuck and not grow. And we're meant to grow. We're humans. We are meant to explore and grow and become more and not just stay stagnant. I actually heard two things. I actually heard that when you are in a depressive state, it's because you have stopped growing, and that more often than not, you need to get back to the spiritual side of yourself, whatever that means for you, and maybe that's just time for self-discovery, but that it's actually because you're stagnant.
Yeah.
Therefore, you need to find a way. And of course, there are other times when people are, legitimately need deeper assistance, but that's a frequent reason for a depression. So that's
Yeah.
something to keep in mind. And I just heard this, like, I don't know, maybe yesterday? Some lady said, and I can't guarantee this is true, but I like the idea, that if you listen to birds out in nature for 5 minutes, you will stay more positive for the next 8 hours. And I think that's brilliant, and I feel like anytime I go and sit on my back deck, because we get a lot of birds, I'm always just like, "Ah, everything's better." Right?
Yeah.
Like, everything is better after listening to them.
I
But
believe
I
that,
like
and
the idea of
I think there is some science to that because, I mean,
yeah.
if you think about it, all it is sounds. It's sounds and frequencies, and
Mhm.
those are higher pitched sounds, which oftentimes, if you go on YouTube and you look for sounds or any, any meditation app, and you're looking for meditation sounds that it'll say raise your vibration, raise your energy, create greater happiness, create
Yep,
greater feelings of joy. They usually are higher frequencies. So like 963 hertz,
yep.
just higher in number, and I don't know the science behind birdsong. I'm actually curious. I might look it up. But
Mhm.
yes, a big part of my brand too is sound, is music,
Yep.
is helping people understand the way they can use music and sound as a mindfulness practice, simply because focusing on the breath, sitting in stillness, just, sitting in silence, sitting by yourself. I try to meet people where they are, and that can seem
Yes.
very daunting. It can seem very advanced. It can seem very hard, quite frankly. Whereas music is quite effective. Like there are literally scientists that create devices and create research that helps us understand the healing nature and science of sound. And so because I understand that, I'm like, why don't I just incorporate that into the practice? And it feels like a much more easier entry point for a lot of people, and teaching them how to listen to music mindfully, like how to just be able to close your eyes and listen to the birds, or close your eyes, listen to a song, and that's a big part of it, to close the eyes.
Mhm.
I say that because we have five senses, and they're all activating, at the same time.
Yep.
When you shut one off, it heightens the others. Similar to the movie, the listeners have ever seen the movie Ray, about Ray Charles. There's a beautiful scene when he's a child, the singer Ray Charles, who was blind.
Mhm.
And when he was a child, he was, dealing with this diagnosis of being blind. And he's in a room, and there's a cricket in the room. And at first, he's like crying because he's upset that he can't see the cricket, and he's upset at just his condition. And his mother's watching this, and she just stops. She literally stops and allows him to kind of figure this out. And so
Mhm.
he's crying hysterically, and then suddenly he stops because he hears the cricket, and he just starts to listen. And then he starts to actually go towards the cricket, not being able to see it. And his sound is so in tune that he's actually able to grab it, which, if you know anything about crickets, that's not easy to do. They hop and they move away
Yeah.
as soon as, right, they're
Or
very reactive to touch. He's able to actually physically grab it because his sight is now diminished, and his sound is heightened. And it's a big part of his story as one of the greatest musicians, the greatest pioneers of music of all time, with that deficit. So, long-winded way to say, closing the eyes, listening to music without that sense, you will notice so much more. Even
oh,
if
yeah.
it's a song you've listened to your entire life, you do that. And especially if it's music that has like positive messages, if it's music rooted in spirituality, or just positive outcomes, you feel it more intensely. You're more in tune with the artist's intention, right? Which was to uplift. And we can't be in tune with the artist's intention if we're listening to music in a distracted way. So I think that's where
Yeah.
spiritually it becomes really special and almost magical, because we're aligning our intention with the artist's intention. And then suddenly the artist's intention is fulfilled, which is to create a positive experience for this person. And it happens when we're present.
I think that's why a lot of churches have music, right? Especially
Absolutely.
start off with music is to get you more into and in line with the word that is going to come, and I think it's brilliant, really. I mean, music
Yes.
definitely brings us all together. It's something that everybody enjoys. I don't know if I've ever met somebody who was like, "I don't like music." Like, but if you're that person, I would love to know because that would be fascinating. But I just think it's a great way, and like you said earlier, I mean, with YouTube, you can just go on YouTube. I have YouTube playing whenever I'm trying to work because I am ADHD. I try to remember, 1, put my phone on do not disturb, turn off the
Always.
notifications, because otherwise, forget it. That's why I'm, like, not the fastest to respond to emails because I have to turn those notifications off
Yep.
to be able to function. But then I go on YouTube in a different tab, and I open up background music,
Mhm,
and I try to pick, like, the ones that are good for focus because they say
mhm,
they are, and I wanna trust that they know what they're talking about.
mhm,
So hopefully they work. And I find that I'm much better at staying in line with the task when I have that music in those correct hertz, whatever they may be,
mhm.
going around in the background. Well, I
Yeah,
also find this is interesting, this has nothing to do with it, that if I need to, like, clean, music in the background helps me get motivated and stay going because the body in motion stays in motion. So if
mhm,
the song's going and I'm bopping along, I just keep cleaning
yeah,
versus stop cleaning.
yeah.
Or if I have to cook, I like to put cooking shows on.
Oh,
So I
cool,
kind of
yeah,
yeah, I don't know what it is about that, but it's like somebody else is cooking on the TV, so I'm cleaning the kitchen and
yeah,
cooking, and I could, like, focus on it because I think it's body doubling, which is nice.
yeah. And to touch on the first thing you said as far as background music while we're working, there's actually a lot of science behind that too. It's like the science of flow, right? And this is something that I've always known it, but I've started to learn it more deeply. And really, it's rooted in repetition. So
Mm.
the way we learn, right, and even our school systems, and so much of learning is rooted in repetition. The
Yep.
more you do the same thing over and over again, the more you will learn it. Nobody would argue that, right? A really cool study was that of cab drivers in London, and they studied their brains, particularly the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that helps us with like spatial recognition, as
Mhm.
well as memory. Yep, yep. And they found that cab drivers had larger hippocampi, and a lot of it had to do with their ability to or their behavior of driving, kind of doing this repetitive job. As a result, they develop amazing spatial recognition. Like they don't need maps. They remember where to go much more effectively. And that's because they're doing the same thing over and over again. How that ties to flow in music. Well, when you listen to certain songs on repeat, it actually shuts off some of that distraction. And
Right.
so that's actually my secret to locking into flow. Like it is listening to certain stations and certain sounds, but sometimes if you just put the same song on repeat, right? Just play one song, typically an instrumental, something
Mhm.
that it's like a combination of when you're working specifically, you want something that is going to keep you energized, but also relaxed. So you don't want to pick the thing that's too relaxing, and you don't want to
Mhm.
pick the thing that's going to make you overly stimulated. So and
Right.
that's different for every person.
Sure. Yeah.
General rule is, lo-fi style music works well. It's designed
Yep.
to be a combination of that. Some jazz records work well, some classical music, but again, instrumentals. And the fact that you're playing it on repeat, it sort of helps to, it helps the brain, like not have as many distractions.
Well,
And
because it's coming.
exactly, yeah,
Oh, so you're all you hear it, but you already know, so your brain, like, tunes it out to a certain degree
exactly, yeah,
because
yeah.
you already know what's gonna happen next, so there's not that anticipation.
Exactly. An anticipation that we're not necessarily conscious of,
Sure.
right? And that's kind of the big point. We'll think that this doesn't matter because we'll say things like, "Well, I'm not responding to the change in song." But the reality is subconsciously you are. The
Yep.
degree to which you are is
Um,
different, but you are by nature of you being a human being. So just cutting that out. And it's no different from what you said earlier about putting your phone on do not disturb, being willing to let
so
certain
important.
messages go a little bit, longer. Though all of those things help lock you into flow and lock you into a state of concentration. And how that ties to confidence is in that condition, right? And this is more we think about like the output because confidence is there's a layer to it that's perception, but then
Yeah.
there's a layer to it of when you produce positive results, and that's based on external feedback, that's based on your different metrics, whether they're sales metrics or performance metrics. As those improve, you will gain greater confidence. And so the
Absolutely.
more you work in flow, the better your output will be. The better your output is, the greater sort of external and internal validation you'll receive, which will also help you to improve your confidence. And if you're doing it the way that I just said with a mindful perspective, you're also getting the double impact of being mindful,
Mm.
where your amygdala, your nervous system, your hormones, it's all being regulated behind the scenes. So it's like a really, really efficient way to an efficient model to practice mindfulness with the intention of increasing confidence outcomes.
Fantastic. and fascinating all at the same time. I think the struggle that I have a lot, and I know I'm not alone, is getting started
Yeah.
with things. So how do you like difficult tasks, something you really have to focus on or that you're procrastinating on because it's big? How do you find ways to utilize the mindfulness to get yourself going? Is it something you do in the morning? Is it something that you have like a little way of like control yourself like, okay, and getting yourself together? Like, talk to me about getting started. 'Cause I
Yeah,
think
the getting
that's really one of the biggest things, right?
yeah,
Like even if you don't have ADHD, like that can be it can be daunting to start something. And then, time goes by and you've wasted time, then you're mad at yourself. Oh,
right. Yeah,
I
and
hate
for
myself.
me, part of the answer has come in learning and understanding myself,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
What I One of the biggest ahas that I've made, especially as being an entrepreneur, and then especially as being in this world of speaking, which is it's a very different energy that I'm used to. It's networking at a pace that I've never experienced. Even if I'm not going to any networking events and just doing keynotes, there is still a level of interaction with audience members and new people and sales and all these different
Mhm.
dynamics that I never thought that I was supposed to be doing or was good at. But what I've
Right.
learned about myself is that I require warm up. Like
Mm,
I require, like it's not an option. I have to warm up to my environment. I have to warm up to tasks. It's very rare. I mean, and even if I do just jump in, it then I'm going to feel more anxious in that,
okay.
right? And
Yeah.
I'm going
Yeah.
to think more negative thoughts and there's a higher risk that my output may not be as best or that I could get stuck in that state of procrastination. So for me, I do not take warm up for granted. I
Mm,
build it into my schedule. I try to wake up early. I'm like a more of a mid-morning person, but I do try to wake up, 5:30 in the morning so that I can have some alone time before I have to start getting my son. I have a 7-year-old son, getting him ready for the day. But I allow between like 5:30 and like 10 a.m. as time for me to kind of figure out my day.
okay.
Right. And I just allow that. And I still struggle with it because I'm so used to, you're supposed to start working at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m.
Yeah.
I'm not being productive,
Oh,
all of this.
do.
Right, all of these thoughts, and I will acknowledge that for some people that is their reality, right?
Oh,
They
absolutely.
have to
Yeah.
start at 8 a.m., but even 30 because here's the secret. What often happens, especially now, I can spend 30 minutes, just 30 minutes of just quiet time, sitting on my porch listening to the birds, having my cup of coffee, going for a walk, walking to my local coffee shop, getting my cup of coffee. I can spend 30 minutes and it's like clockwork. I'll get inspired, I'll remember something, and then it's like, "Oh, got it."
You're
Boom,
not.
boom, 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 and then the challenge is getting me out of it, right? Like, how do I like, "Oh, shoot, I gotta go get my son. I'm so
Right. Oh,
excited about my work. I'm trying to
right.
finish this email, or finish this whatever." Which that's another task or
Yeah.
another kind of
Exactly.
topic. But yeah, like just really allowing yourself to flow how you flow. Like some people are or early morning people. They can wake up, do their meditation, do their workout, and then get right to work. But find what works for you, and but always bake in mind time. I can't take that, I can't, take that for granted enough. And it can look
Yeah.
different for different people. So some
Absolutely.
really quick tips. Like I said, that could be sitting on the porch, sitting on the porch with your coffee as opposed to, sitting inside. Anytime you can combine nature with it, you get a
And
boost
the sunlight
with the
sunlight early in
sun.
the morning is one
Yes.
of those huge helpful things that
Yes.
we take for granted for sure.
Absolutely. And then, taking deep breaths, starting with affirmations. I
Mhm.
often will do that even if I'm still asleep. And when I wake up, like this morning, I woke up at 5:30 and I just wasn't feeling it because I had a really busy day yesterday. But instead of completely going back to sleep, I put on an affirmation track. And
Mm,
so even though I'm kind of still in and out of sleep, I'm hearing positive affirmations and it's not a formal meditation, but it's giving me some of those benefits. And then when I actually did wake up, I still had time to make it to the gym and go for my walk and just really ease into my day. And I give myself that grace because I believe, and this is part of it too, is really believing that doing doing life that way will yield better results.
mm. That's huge. It's about I say this a lot, give yourself permission because a lot of times we are, like, caught up in that, like, what I should be doing, what I could and I'm the same way. I am not quick in the morning. I've always been a night owl. I was
Mhm.
always late. I always get my best ideas then, it felt like. And I would beat myself up because it would be 10, 11, noon, and I haven't gotten anything done, right?
Right.
Air quotes, because of course I did stuff, but it wasn't the sit down work stuff I was
Yeah.
supposed to do. And I would just beat myself up, but then guess what happens? I'm beating myself up, so then I'm upset with myself, so then do I actually get any productivity done?
Right.
No.
Right.
No, I do not. And then I'm upset that nothing happened today, and then it leads it like, it's just this awful chain reaction
Right.
that what am I now? I'm gonna be 37 in a week, and I'm finally realizing that it's okay. Like, I don't have to be the societal 9 to 5.
Right.
What works for me? My husband and I actually recently have been getting up and getting to the 6:30 AM gym class, which, you know me, you know I like to work out, but not early. I'm like, "Yeah, we'll get there at some point at 8:30, noon, 3:30, 4:30, but 6:30 in the morning? No."
Yeah.
But it's been such a game changer to get out of bed, get that accomplished, get home by 7:30. We still have time to take the girl to school. Thankfully, she's old enough she can get herself ready. That helps. But it gets the day started and
Yeah.
something productive knocked out early
Yep.
so that I can then I'm starting my work day earlier because, if you have a kid, like, if you gotta get your kid after school, there is no 5 o'clock. Are
Mhm.
you kidding me? At 3, I'm already, like, going down "Okay, time to wrap up because I gotta get the kid, then you gotta make the dinner." Then, like, and then you're like, "Dang it, I never got back to doing what I needed to accomplish."
Yeah.
So I think that has definitely helped a lot is that, 1, understanding yourself, giving yourself that
Yes.
permission, giving yourself, like you said, grace. Oh,
Yes.
give yourself grace. That's so huge. Ron Chapman is a friend of mine. He talks about giving yourself grace a lot,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
it's so important. And we don't do that enough. But understanding what works for you and
Yeah.
then making that work for you
Yeah.
and making it a priority. Huge.
Absolutely. And even little things, like there's I can't remember his name, but I think he's an Army colonel or Navy um, admiral. He has this famous talk about the
That's
importance
good.
of making your bed.
Yes.
Making your
That.
bed first thing in the morning, and how that is this is literally what you said. It's accomplishing something, right? And a lot of times that's what we need to get out of procrastination is to check something off of our list.
Yep.
And so small executable tasks, and even when you think about meditation, thinking about it from a small executable task perspective. And also, like, I like to think about things in terms of like compound benefit. So,
Mm.
as you know, a lot of what I do is within the corporate space, but where I am branching my business and my offerings into are these nature based mindfulness experiences. And I'm actually hosting one on April 26th at the Dunwoody Nature Center in collaboration with Visit Dunwoody with the city of Dunwoody.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, and
That's a
and the
Saturday, right?
I'm sorry?
Is that a Saturday?
That is a Saturday. That is
Mhm.
a Saturday. And the intention and the inspiration behind that came from my 7-year-old son. We visited the nature center because he got into bees. He wanted to be a beekeeper, and they had a
Of
junior
course.
beekeeper class. Yeah.
As you would.
So cool. And
So
he
cute.
is literally being present, right? Let's just kind of break this down a little bit. First of all, being present with my son and listening to him, hearing him when
Oh,
he
yeah.
just casually mentions how much he loves bees because of Minecraft. Somehow Minecraft, don't ask me the connection, but he loves bees now, and he's
That's a
really
benefit.
yeah, he's really into it. And so I receive that information and I do something with it, which is
Mhm.
find a nature center that has a beekeeper, a junior beekeeper class.
That's so
We
cool.
attend and I visited, and I'm like, this place is amazing. I would love to curate an experience here. This was last year. And here it is coming true because every time I go and visit, and I visited a lot, I see these kids, they're playing. Everyone is
Mhm.
naturally mindful. It's a beautiful space, and it touches on a lot of the ways that my father was mindful. He was a very
Mhm.
present parent. And he was the type of parent that didn't just, like give the child a device, or because we had our video games and cartoons, and he could have easily, as a single dad, especially, gave me something to pacify me, being
Oh,
like in
yeah.
his 20s at that. But no, he was the type of dad that played with you, that we went to nature parks all the time. We would skip rocks. We would do all these things in nature. And now I understand the science behind that, the science of grounding, the science of the sun, the science of touching trees. And so I'm like, this is a really, really cool way and a way to create a healing experience
That's
for
awesome.
people in nature so that you have this compounded benefit. And we'll be playing around with, different elements. We're going to work with water and we're going to work with fire to release things that no longer serve us. And we're going to do some deeper meditations with tools, with eye masks and with different sensory tools to make this truly a multi-sensory experience combined with the science-backed benefits of nature.
That's really cool. I think that's one of the benefits of Atlanta that makes Atlanta so unique. And when I say Atlanta, of course, I do mean the whole metropolitan of Atlanta, which is huge. It's not just a proper by any means, but there's just so many beautiful places. There's so many parks, trails. By us in Cobb County, like there are so many places that you can go for a walk, miles of trails, and it's just ingrained in our society within Georgia. I really should say within Georgia because it's, the whole state. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that a lot of people don't get, that we can easily take for granted. And we have so many festivals and fun things to do, and they're almost always outside or in
Yep.
some cool historic building, but,
Mhm.
like, most of the time outside. Um,
Yeah,
I
and a
think
lot of these
that's
natural parks,
that's
their visitation is not. I mean, they're like best kept secrets. I
yeah,
don't want to comment on how frequently attended they are, but they're definitely best kept secrets. Every time I mention this event at the Dunwoody Nature Center, 95% of the time people have never heard.
wow,
And I'm the type of person where I seek out those spaces. I seek
yeah,
out natural spaces. It's a part of my lifestyle. It's a part of my mindfulness routine. It's a part of my dad's legacy. So I seek them out. And that's exactly why I'm doing these events. And I'm actually partnering with these different cities and convention and visitors bureaus to curate experiences all over the state of Georgia, all over the Southeast, to remind people that your healing, your ability to experience mindfulness in nature, your ability to have a retreat. You can absolutely travel to a faraway place, Mexico, Bali, all of these amazing
sure,
places.
yeah,
Um,
beautiful.
and we should treat our Saturdays as retreat and vacation time too. And we can't go to Bali every Saturday, most of us. But you can absolutely explore one of the many, 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 many
There's so many.
amazingly beautiful spaces in the state of Georgia or in the Southeast at a very affordable rate. And you can do it in community with your family. You can make new friends. You can bring your team. You can, just trying new things and getting us reconnected to nature is really getting us reconnected to the basics of life, similar to
Yeah,
mindfulness and meditation. The reason that mindfulness was so effective, like say thousands of years ago, is because there were just less distractions, right?
yeah,
We didn't have to. If you think about it, the fitness
yeah.
industry is a new industry.
Oh,
There was
yeah,
a time where if
'cause
you
we
saw
didn't need it.
you didn't need it. If you saw someone running down the street, actually in like as early as or as late as the 1920s, if you saw somebody running down the street, you would think that they were crazy because
Yeah,
jogging was not a thing. That did not become a thing until much more recent in our
mhm,
history. And so our lifestyles were naturally much more mindful at one period of time. And that doesn't mean that we need to go back to that time. I love my modern conveniences and I love, you know, I love there are aspects of my life that I actually enjoy,
right.
um, but being able to, bring that
Humbling.
back, right?
Yep,
Slow down,
yep,
take time, be willing to miss an email, right? Be willing to allow 24 hours to go by. That's calming your nervous system and not being so reactive because that's what's happening right now. We're so reactive, we're ping ponging from thing to thing. And so teaching yourself to slow down, it gives you a different perspective, it improves your output, and oftentimes you create greater connection with those that you're in community with.
absolutely. And I've said it multiple times, it is a luxury for somebody to get your response instantaneously.
Yes,
It is not necessary at every moment.
absolutely.
I put it down, put it away, like, and people understand, and if they don't understand, it's probably not a person you wanna be around.
Yeah, yeah. Everything's not for everyone, right? And then that's another thing, as we think about confidence, acceptance, right? Like I think a big, big part of confidence that we don't necessarily talk about enough is acceptance of things. Just things are what they are.
Yeah.
We strive so hard to put a label, to
Oh
define, and
my
really to
gosh.
put it in a category of good or bad. which requires us oftentimes to make assumptions and to take things personal.
Which never
And
works
when we're right, and when we're making assumptions and when we're taking things personal, we're in thought loops, right?
Yep.
We're in thought loops that really most of the time they're just not productive, they're not effective, they're not efficient. And so being able to sort of, just really accept things as they are without so much judgment is the cornerstone of mindfulness. Like one of the biggest, like kind of the one of the I think one of my favorite definitions of mindfulness is really paying attention on purpose without judgment. And so
Mm.
the more we do that, we practice living life, not all the time because judgment matters, but the more we do
Mm.
that, right?
True.
The more we live and we can live life and be in a state of non-judgment, then suddenly things don't bother us as much. And then suddenly we have room to be more confident because we're not so disturbed and triggered.
That right? Paying
Got
attention
it.
without judgment.
You got it.
Good one. We gotta write that down. Well, I think that's a good place for us to start to wrap it up. I really appreciate you coming on the show, sharing with us your thoughts, your ideas, and bringing a new perspective to confidence, which wasn't something that I had really thought about before. I've always noticed when I go out in nature, I go for a walk, I take the dog for a walk, I always feel better.
Yeah,
Feeling better, I think, is part of having more confidence because if you feel good about yourself, it's hard to not have confidence in what you're doing. And
absolutely.
that's a good point. Take your dog on a walk. Get a dog. If you don't have a dog, borrow one. Definitely take one out of a shelter if you need a buddy to go on walks with,
Mhm.
especially here in Georgia. They're overflowing. They need your help. But get yourself out there. I mean, eh, think about a dog. Think about a dog. They
Yeah,
are so confident. Are you kidding me? They don't care what anybody thinks. They're just happy and they're doing them and they always want to be outside. And there's a reason for that because we are supposed to be outside. As
right.
humans, we were never meant to just live in buildings 24/7. Like that's not and sit at computers and have electronics in our lives constantly. Yesterday, I'll leave it this. My girl, she, wears the ear pods, and a lot of kids do this now, right?
Mhm.
They have ear pods in the entire time, all day at school, which I
Oh,
don't
wow.
even know if that's allowed,
Yeah,
but I don't get to make those decisions. But I'm like, "Isn't that can't be good for you."
yeah,
And she was like, "What?" I was like, "It's like you've literally got electronics in your brain 24/7. That can't be good for the brain. So we really gotta disconnect."
literally.
Literally. I mean, come on. And
Yeah,
just, become one with the nature to feel happier, which then is more confident, which then is more productive, and all the things. So,
that's right.
Shanta, thank you for being here today. Where can we find you if the peoples want to learn more, connect with you, see what you're up to?
Yes, you can find me on my website, ShawntàHooks.com, as well as social media, Shawntà Speaks, Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And yeah, and just stay tuned for a lot of really cool experiences that are coming from me that are designed for both the organizational space, but also out in the community, really inspiring people to return to stillness, to return to greater simplicity, less distraction, and absolutely greater nature.
Greater, all the good things. Thank you for coming on. I do appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. If you found this interesting, enlightening, please leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought was useful, or if you have an expanded idea, or if you have a question. Of course, that's always welcome as well. And if there's somebody that you think would benefit from this, please feel free to share. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe. We would love to know that you're watching and hope that you have a beautiful, positive, happy, and productive day post listening to Yes You May with Amanda Mae Gray. Thanks, Gal.